Earlier this week, I had the chance to speak with Andrew D.H. Moore, author of the recent steampunk epic, Children of Solo. We met by sheer chance. I happen to live in the city where he grew up, and I work with a friend of his. I know this might be a hard pill to swallow, but it really does pay off to go outside and talk with people and mention that you wrote a book or that you know somebody who has. Hi everyone, I'm James, an author, editor, and the owner of The Arcanist, an independent publisher dedicated to sharing excellent fantasy fiction. Through The Arcanist, I edit the literary fantasy magazine, which is entirely focused on character-driven fantasy. So imagine my excitement when Andrew, an author also devoted to character-driven fantasy, agreed to talk on the channel. We spoke about his excellent debut book and how he's navigated the treacherous seas, or shall I say, treacherous starfields, of becoming an independent author. If you're interested in Children of Solo, you're in luck. I'm giving away a signed copy to one lucky viewer, along with a signed copy of the literary fantasy magazine, Winter 2025. The link to the giveaway and to Children of Solo is in the description. If you enjoy what I do, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It helps me out more than you know. Now, let's get on to the talk.
Yeah, so I came to Colorado in 2010, and I got my master's degree in classical archaeology here at CU Boulder. Um, I studied the sort of Hellenistic Greece, so basically the time of Alexander the Great through the Roman conquest of Greece around 69 BC. Was kind of the area that I was focused on, and but through grad school we had a pretty strong cohort. Until we all became really good friends, and a lot of us ended up staying in Colorado. And when grad school ended in 2012, I ultimately decided I'm done with pursuing higher education for the time being. I had kind of gone into it with the understanding that I was going to get a PhD. And there's still a romantic notion about getting a PhD, I think, for me, but it's more of a personal quest, perhaps, than a professional quest. But I ended up staying in Colorado and just kind of falling in love with the scenery, with the mountains, with the people here. Coming from Indiana, there are a lot of Midwestern transplants here, and it felt like home pretty quickly. I joke, people still tease me because I moved out here and I adopted all of the Colorado cliches. I started listening to bluegrass music. I grew a beard. I started hiking 14ers. I started homebrewing, and all of the very Colorado things that there are to do. And I'm still enjoying those things, and adding, writing novels, thanks to that list. Found a strong literary community here in Colorado, and it's been, full steam ahead on books now for about a year and a half. So
Fantastic. So when you say full steam ahead, also nice pun to tie into your brand.
yeah, yeah.
um, how are you making writing books work from a living standpoint? Are you full time or are you balancing it with a job?
I so I currently I'm not balancing with a job. I have an incredible wife who is helping support me. Um, and some savings and things from my time in craft beer. But it was time. I left brewing in, I want to say, November of 2023. I think that's right. Yeah, and I went on a kind of a big. I did my 40 days in the desert and came back, and really started writing full time in like February of 2024, and then this book came out in April of this year of 25.
Well, that's a good
So
pace.
yeah, it was. I mean, it's something I've been thinking about forever. It's something I've always wanted to do, and we were finally at a point where I could kind of give it a try. I think COVID showed a lot of people, perhaps including me, that it was time to sort of go out and try the thing you've been dreaming about. One of the things I'm kind of focusing on right now in addition to more books is, what can the book do from, how can I kind of leverage the book into other um, writing avenues, right? So can do some mentoring, some editing, some coaching, some things like that, some speaking, that go along with, having that qualification now of the book being published.
Absolutely. Yeah, as writers, we have to wear several hats all the time. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't just write books. I edit other books. I edit stories. I do copywriting and advertisements because I just need to find some way to to put words on paper for a living. Um, yeah, that's awesome that your wife is so supportive and that you're making this effort. That's a big step. A lot of people are
yeah,
afraid to do that, and it's daunting for sure. So, um, I mean, it seems like you've done a lot of work to to create this good brand. The first thing I noticed when our mutual friend Louise uh, told me about your work. He's like, "Oh, I know a writer," and I looked up your book immediately, and I was like taken away by the cover art. It's like, this is amazing. This is awesome. This totally speaks to me as a reader.
awesome.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I'm glad to know. Yeah, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on the cover. Yeah, thank you for saying that. I'm really pleased. I worked with a really talented graphic designer um, out of Detroit. His name's Justin Scott, um, and he's done a lot. He did the full cover, a lot of the promotional materials, logos, and things like that. And he's just been awesome. You know, I think I came into this with a little bit of an advantage in having run a business before, um, even though it was, unrelated to writing and selling books. On some level, I feel like marketing is marketing.
yeah,
And part of leadership, right, in running a business is, identifying the areas where you need help, right, and where you're not an expert. And I am certainly not a visual artist in that way. Like, I don't have the graphic design chops. I don't have the patience with technology uh, to to do something like that. And so, working with Justin was great. He did a wonderful job, and yeah, I think, and also, it's knowing where your book fits, right? And I spent a lot of time going to bookstores and looking at the covers of fantasy books and science fiction books, and to, and what they look like and the tropes that they pull on, and because as much as we say that we don't, we all judge books by their cover. And
absolutely,
especially when you're writing a 540 page introduction to a larger fantasy epic, right? It's a you know that's a I reckon that's a steep buy-in for some people, to pick up a book of that size or commit to a longer series. And so, we're looking at things like the cover, we're looking at things like the blurb, and I think, and constantly, and self-published work is being constantly elevated and looking more professional. So
absolutely. Yeah, the judge the cover by the book for listeners out there, it is absolutely a thing. The cover is what gets people to read the blurb on the back, and the blurb on the back is what convinces people to spend 8+ hours with your book. Um, which you have an excellent blurb on your back. I really liked the simplicity of it. A pirate captain fights for her family. I mean, that's appealing to a couple of different things just in one sentence. So, I mean, tell me a bit about Addie Crestone. What was your inspiration for her, and were there any personal connections like to that character? How much of you is in her?
yeah, I mean, so that's it. That's an interesting question. When I first envisioned Addie Crestone, I was thinking about self-publishing, and a lot of the advice that I was getting was publish, 80 to 100,000 word books as fast as you can, right? And so I had initially sort of envisioned Addie Crestone as kind of like a more like the the Maxon Laird like adventure prince character that's in the book. He's this sort of almost like comical adventurer, and I kind of thought of her as like as almost like a female space pirate Indiana Jones, right? Like I love the Indiana Jones movies, but if you watch them, like they're pretty tongue in cheek, right? And they move pretty fast, and um, there's a lot of things where you just move fast and don't ask questions, and it's a lot of fun. And so I had originally envisioned like writing several kind of shorter books um, in that vein, right? Like this is an Addie Crestone book, The Adventures of Space Pirate Addie Crestone or something. And then when I got into the story, um, there was just a lot more there. And if I'm being sort of, I guess, honest with myself about like what I'm interested in, I had a difficult time sort of just like operating at that, I guess, sort of like shallower level. Um, and so it became, her character just became more and more complex. But I do think that sort of grew into like one of the central tensions in her character. One of like the internal struggles that Addie deals with is that she wants to be that hero, right? She grew up reading these Max and Laird novels, in the way that I don't know, I grew up reading like the Hardy Boys books or something like that. And she kind of has these fantasies still about what freedom means, being a pirate means, and these kinds of things. But ultimately, that's not who she is, right? She is on more of this like heroine's journey where she needs help, right? A pirate captain without a crew is not much of a captain. Um, as far as like I don't know, elements of me. I'm sure there are elements of me in there. I think that I take like I tend to take elements of people that I know and kind of sprinkle them across characters as opposed to being like, oh, Theo is definitely, directly inspired from this person, right?
Yeah.
Or, Ion is definitely inspired from this person. And there are things I think that a lot of people can relate to um, in some of those character struggles. Like, I know a lot of people, a lot of guys who, struggle with things that Theo struggles with, right? He wants to be his own autonomous person and kind of go out on his own, but he also wants his father to be proud of him, right? I know a lot of women, in Addie's shoes who have had to deal with things like sexual violence or male aggression and these kinds of things, right? Or children like Ion, whose kind of social safety nets and families have kind of failed them. And from a very young age, they have to kind of make their own way in the world. And so there's that kind of like general level of like these are things that people can relate to, and then more specific level of like drawing in elements of people's lives um, that I know in some of the more intimate moments. But I think kind of spreading it out across characters has the effect of like making those characters more appealing while also like protecting the stories and histories and vulnerabilities of the people that it's that they might be based on.
Yeah, and I think that's a natural thing to do too. Like in my fiction, I definitely pull from real life, real traumas, either my own or people I know. But I can never just point to one person and be like, "That's you. That this is your
Yeah.
character." I'd say that part of this is you. This is definitely inspired, especially when I'm writing women. I look at the women in my life and I ask them questions. Um, did you find yourself to write, being a male author, writing a woman lead? Did
Yeah.
you find yourself talking with the women in your life and having them read over things and
Oh,
see how that
absolutely.
went?
Yeah. I was sort of, I mean, on some level, I was kind of terrified um, to write a book where, the protagonist is a woman. I think uh, lots of writers get the advice to write what you know, and that means different things to different people. And I think there's a segment of readers and writers out there who see it in a more sort of narrow, constricted way than I do. Um, but yeah, I had, all the women in my life read this book. The many women in my writing group read this book. Many beta readers who were women read this book, because it was important to me to, um, for it to be realistic, to not run into these problems of, there's a long tradition of male fantasy authors writing women as basically men with boobs, right? Like,
Yeah, it's an unfortunate truth.
yeah, and it happens, and it's unfortunate, um, but I think, and it's getting better, but there are lots of, and it goes both ways. And I mean, another thing I did was I read a lot of books, fantasy and otherwise, that were, whose protagonists were, not the gender of the author, right? Whether it was, like, Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch, right? Like the primary protagonist is like a teenage boy, or, My Absolute Darling, right? Or Memoirs of a Geisha, or, so even books outside of the genre as well.
Yeah,
Because I read all over the place, but to kind of see how successful authors were doing it, right? Um, and I've been, fortunately, knock on wood, the responses so far have been overwhelmingly positive, and I think at the end of the day, like for me, writing what you know is sort of writing about humanity and the human condition, and on some level, we're not that different. Um,
yeah. There's, I mean, write what you know can be taken to the extreme when it comes to some writing. My definition of it is, well, have you ever been forced to make a hard decision in your life? Okay, so you know
yeah,
what conflict feels like. How can
yeah,
you write what you know in a world where there are space pirates and
exactly.
what was the mineral called that fuels the ship? Um, what
Oh, you're
was
thinking of like the astral dust, the stellarium.
the Stellarium?
Yeah,
Yeah, so blending science fiction and fantasy. I guess it's almost like a science fantasy, almost.
yeah,
Would you say,
yeah.
rather than a hard science fiction? That's what I was picking up on. Um, how did you manage coming up with those setting details? Was that a
Yeah.
stretch of your brain, or do you think a lot of it just kind of came naturally as you wrote? Was it a lot of planning?
Um, I didn't, I sort of didn't set out to write, um, like science fantasy or even steampunk really. Um, like I was aware of steampunk. I had read William Gibson and Tim Powers, um, and Neil Stevenson, and um, and I enjoyed it. But my first love has been, fantasy. I grew up reading all of, Dragonlance and Lord of the Rings, and Tad Williams and Terry Brooks and all those guys. And so I was kind of like, well, I'm going to write epic fantasy. And it just became more sort of steampunk over as I was going. And eventually I kind of surrendered to it. And I spent a lot of time looking at kind of the history of steampunk and going to some steampunk conventions. And I enjoyed the, the, the craftsmanship of it. That's sort of tactile. Like steampunk is a very like tactile genre. People are always making stuff, building stuff, wearing stuff. That was a ton of fun. Um, I am not an incredibly like handy man, um, but it's fascinating to see the sort of like blending of the creativity with the authors and the makers and all those things. So I finally just sort of gave into it, and I kind of had to go back and like beef up the steampunk credentials of the first part of the book. And now I'm just having a ton of fun with it. And for me, it is kind of like the steampunk technology in some way sense, like is kind of hard science fiction aspect, thinking about like how steam engines work and all this stuff. Because I would, it's in my mind, like hard science fiction is like, I don't know, like the three body problem, right? Is hard science
Yeah.
fiction that spends a lot of time really in the weeds about how these protons unfold. Um, and this is a little, with magic and with the steam, it's a little bit, it's different. But I approached it, I guess the short answer to your question is more from a fantasy standpoint, and like I went through and kind of built a magic system, um, and thought about the races and the cities, um, and then I also fell in love with The Expanse, that series of books, um, and and space opera in general. And I read all 9 of the Expanse books, and I was like, I can do that. Like, part of it was I read those books, and like I remember thinking these authors, these, because it's 2 guys, right, writing under one name, and they're having so much fun, right? Like the Expanse books are so much fun. They probably won't go down in the science fiction pantheon as like epic works of literature, but they're so much fun. And you can tell, and you just share like there's all these things happening, right? With space zombies and everything, and it's just like that really appealed to me, and so I that became probably an influence as well. I mean, like in the character of Solomon Brock, for example, you get this Filani inspector who kind of comes from that like detective noir world that is a piece of the Expanse books, and so yeah, all those things kind of got blended together to create the genre, science fantasy, steampunk science fantasy, whatever we end up calling it.
Yeah.
And I think it's still something I'm trying to like find the like exact right words to talk about it. Because I think in some sense, like a lot of it is marketing, right? Like
Yeah.
genres, marketing. I don't know about you when you're writing. I mean, I know plenty of people who write to market, and they're like, "This is going to be a romance book," and they do the romance tropes, and they're very successful. But like, that's not what I wanted to do. And so, thinking about the genre has been kind of a like an ex post facto exercise.
Yeah. What kind of reader did you envision enjoying your book? Did you kind of write with a target audience in mind, or how did you approach that?
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's definitely. I mean, I always tell people like the book is. Um, I think for lovers of epic fantasy and science fiction, kind of from high school age uh, up. Like, I don't think it fits in a young adult category. There's nothing particularly explicit, but it just deals with, I think, some more advanced, complicated themes and among the characters. And then and so yeah, I mean, I think for all of the kind of genre bending and blending, I really think of it as a book that resonates with readers of like fantasy and epic fantasy, and in looking for some comparative uh, novels, because that's often what the marketers and the traditional publishers and things are asking about. Is people kind of think about it in terms of like some really great fan, like She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan, or Babel, R.F. Kuang. I think it's like kind of exploring themes of like power and betrayal, and these worlds where like technology and magic sort of intersect, right? I think like people who love Philip Pullman, like his Dark Materials, like I think there's a lot of crossover and similarity there, both in some world building with things like I have the Felani, who are these like animal these kind of anthropomorphic animal characters um, that inhabit the world. And so yeah. But I also, it's also something, when you're self-publishing, you have to wear all the hats. Even if you hire out, you have to wear all the hats. And I would say that's, in some sense, that's like still a learning curve for me. Sometimes I feel like, where is it that all of these people are figuring out who their readers are, right? Because it's
Yeah.
often a question like, who's your target audience? And they're like, very specific answer. I'm like, how? Like, did you talk to them all? Like, where did you find them? So I think about it more in terms of like, what do you like to read, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to like, how old are you? Are you male or female? Um, but more like, what do you like to read? And it's certainly, I think, a little bit more on the complex, maybe like cerebral end of the spectrum as far as fantasy goes. So if you're a Tad Williams fan, for example, I like him. I love to get into the kind of folklore, mythology, and the world building of a place, and that resonates with me too. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, marketing can be oversimplistic, I think, in the publishing industry. I mean, it's useful to think of like one specific archetype that you're selling to, but at the same time, a good book is a good book.
Yeah.
And if you're putting quality into and taking pride in your craft, you're going to find your people. You're there, and you have such a specific niche here with Children of Solo. It's definitely something that I was looking for because I've always like admired steampunk from afar, but I can't
Hmm.
point to any one thing and be like, that's steampunk. I mean, there were those Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies, which were like
Hmm.
kind of steampunk, and
Yeah.
I guess only video game I can think of that I played was Dishonored. Like, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, that game was kind of steampunk. So it's cool to have a book in hand, a big chunky book that has all
Yeah.
those things. And when I started reading it, I was so delighted with, I mean, it starts out minor spoilers for the beginning, but you're going to read it anyway. It's a good beginning. You just kick it into overdrive and it's a heist gone wrong. Great way to start a book, by the way. Um, when you were writing, so when I'm looking at my book, I'm working on the proofread right now of
Sure.
one of the books I'm about to release, and there's a specific chapter in there. I'm like, oh, this is this is my favorite chapter. I love this chapter, and maybe nobody else will feel that way. Do you have a part of your book like that where you go back over it and you're like, I love this. Everything about this is something I love.
Yeah. I mean, to your point about the beginning, I am sort of proud of the beginning. It's probably the part of the book I spent the most time on. I don't know if that's a common thing among authors or not. But I find, I mean, the beginnings are so hard, I
Hmm.
think, and not just because, I mean, you're starting. It's not just the first chapter does so many things, right? It's setting up the book. It's introducing the reader to usually introducing the reader to the protagonist, and in my case, it's setting up a whole series, right? So it's got to hook people enough that they want to read beyond the first book. And I spent a ton of time on the beginning, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. And I do think, yeah, so that's one piece I'm proud of. But when thinking about your question, one of the I really wanted to write like caricature driven fantasy. And in 2000, I don't know, I think 2013 or 14, Salman Rushdie came to the University of Colorado and gave a talk. And I love his books. And I went and I listened to his talk. And at the end, at the Q&A, someone asked him why he's on the record as being pretty denigrating of genre fiction and fantasy. And someone asked him about it, and he just said, "Well, it's because fantasy is usually plot driven and poorly written, and the characters are flat and all these things." And I was really hurt by that because I look at Salman Rushdie as someone as this amazing author. And so part of me is like, well, I'm going to write character-driven fantasy, and one day Salman Rushdie is going to read it and be like, oh, it can be done. And so all that to say, like, the moments that I really love and kind of and really work on and am proud of are kind of those intimate moments, right? Like when Addie and Rekka are having their confrontation at the Crook and Vine, when when Addie's telling Iris Max and Laird stories on the hearth in Stella's Echo, when, Ion and Brock are sort of connecting at around Brock's kitchen table, right? When Theo and Beatrice are on the patio, kind of figuring out how to take control of their own lives, like those moments where there's this sort of one-on-one character interaction, where like that for me is where I hope like the real growth and transformation takes place for those characters, and where readers really feel like, oh, like despite this huge big crazy world with all these things running around in it, like these are people, and and they're experiencing on some level problems that everyone experiences, and they're figuring it out, and they're imperfect, and it's those moments that then sort of drive their decisions going forward, right?
Absolutely.
So that's,
Yeah.
as opposed to, like, I mean, swashbuckling action is fun, and there's plenty of that, I think, but it's those, I think, more intimate moments that I really hope stick in readers' minds.
Absolutely. Character driven fantasy. That's my brand, man. I love that stuff. I had a similar experience in college. It was my first like serious fiction workshop.
Yeah.
And the professor, she was awesome. She was absolutely great. Like one of the best professors I had in my undergrad. And she altered, I found out later through Lee Patton, my fiction editor at the Literary Fantasy magazine, my partner in crime in a lot of ways. He told me that his experience with that, like he got to write all the genre fiction he wanted, but my professor said, none of that. Do not write genre fiction. There's nothing wrong with it, but you need to learn literary fiction. You need to learn character-driven fiction. And then that class totally changed the trajectory of my life. We should get some of your writing in the Literary Fantasy magazine, because that is literally the brand of that magazine. I think you'd fit in perfectly.
Yeah. No, I'll definitely have to send something along. Yeah, I've been really enjoying the magazine. Was it the winter one of 24? This is the one that you sent me. And I saw is it the summer one of 25 that's getting ready to come out?
Yeah, July 31st. We got summer 25 coming out, and heck, I already got a good amount for winter 26.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a lot of fun character-driven fantasy between the two writers in the room here. That's awesome. I definitely detected that when I got a good couple sittings in with the book before we talked, and I loved the tone, and immediately I was captured by Addie's character and her struggle, and I do think you've captured a very compelling theme there with her motivation being for her family, and it makes that combination of family with being a pirate that creates that moral gray area that has driven the careers of writers like Joe Abercrombie, where very relatable people you root for have to do or choose to do some pretty awful, terrible things, and you follow them through it anyway. So Steam and Stars Book 2, is that going to be a thing, or are you going to try something else for a while, or what's the plan?
I mean, I have plenty of things I want to do, right? I find that the more I write, the more I want to write, and the more ideas that I have, right? It's like, I don't know, I find that, like, I try to write a little bit every day, and feel like building that conduit or building that habit of writing every day, like establishes a stronger conduit to the muse or something. and someone once told me, it's like, when the muse finds you, she better find you working.
Mm,
And so like that's been part of it. But I do like, there's only so many hours in the day, and I am self-publishing, and so I feel some urgency around like getting the next book or the next couple books in the Steam and Stars series out before I uh, I kind of venture off into um, other avenues. Um, but yeah, and it's also just, I'm continually sort of studying writing and literature, and also like my own process, right? And writing, having finished and published one book has been a huge um, education and a huge confidence builder. But I feel like, I need to get book 2 or 3 out there before I have the ability to really like to be writing like 2 books at once in 2 different series or something like that. That's gonna take, I'm at, I don't know, I'm at brown belt level, and that's red belt level or something. Um, so, but yeah, so book 2 is in the works. It's due to beta readers September 1st.
September 1st. Okay, that's the date to look out for if you
So
loved
yeah.
Children of Solo.
So yeah,
September 1st, you
yeah,
get
beta
more.
reader September 1st, and then we'll see. There's no release date yet, but hopefully, um, I would love to have it out before the end of the year. We'll see if that happens. But that's the goal anyway. But sometimes life intervenes.
Yeah,
Uh, but that's the goal.
that pace is really impressive. You think that this is an off topic question? This is just
No,
me
you're
asking
fine.
you.
Yeah.
Um, Being that you went through your master's in a humanities related field, do you think that
Yeah.
helped your writing pace? Because you're at like MFA levels of production, where you're able to
Well,
get that big of a book done in a year.
yeah, I think so. I mean, it definitely helped. I mean, and I've drawn so much from that. I mean, uh, I've gotten a lot of favorable feedback around the world building, and I love world building. I could just do world building, um, just like create. I could just create like fantasy encyclopedias and never worry about story, and I'd be happy probably for the rest of my life. Um, but it definitely helps, and also the full time. Like I feel pressure to earn my keep here. Um, as part of my partnership with my wife and things like that. Like if I'm gonna try to make a go of this, then it's incumbent upon me to really make a go of it. Um, and so, when if it's what you're doing full time, there are, you know, I mean, and there are days where I write 200 words, and days where I write 0 words, and days where I write 8,000 words. Um, and so it's not consistent by any means, but it does. And I also think the first book was hard in that you're creating the whole world, right? You're not just writing the book, but you're creating the whole world that the series is going to exist in. And so in some sense, like getting that first book out there feels like this big weight off, because now the guardrails are on the story, and book 2 will be just as big as book 1, but it feels like the path is a little more streamlined, because one, the world is created, the story is set in motion, and two, like I now have a better sense of how to publish a book, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. Now that you've gotten through that hurdle of self publishing, I mean, it gets a lot smoother
I hope
after you do
so.
the first
Yeah.
one. Um,
A couple weeks before it came out, I'm a little bit of a Luddite, and figuring out all the different platforms and things was technology's great when it works, which is, I don't know, 60% of the time.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can our listeners find you, and what are the plugs? Drop them
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. So you can find me on my website. It's adhmore.com. You can follow the fan page on Facebook, Steven Stars. And you can find the book and the ebook on Amazon. as well as the website. But Amazon is the best place for me as a burgeoning author to get sales and reviews. And yeah, I mean, if Children of Solo is something that interests you, one of the most helpful things that you can do for me is go on Amazon and buy the book and leave a review and build that street credibility. So
Fantastic. All those links will be down in the description. And that is all she wrote for today. We can take a breath and
yeah,
awesome.
They go so fast.
Thank you, Andrew, for the excellent conversation. I really do love speaking with authors, and I love hearing about how they make it work. In case you didn't know, writing a book is hard. So it's so interesting to hear other people's perspectives and their processes. I'll be posting more interviews just like this one in the near future. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. We are hosting a giveaway to help spread word about Andrew's debut novel. Click the link in the description to enter for your chance to win a signed copy of Children of Solo and the literary fantasy magazine Winter 2025. I'm shipping 2 books to 1 lucky winner, so sign up now before time runs out. Be sure to check out The Arcanist. We publish excellent fantasy stories every other week to our website, and the summer 2025 issue releases on July 31st. Thank you for watching, folks, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Or maybe sooner. We'll see.